For decades, women have been stuck suffering in the Japanese labor market, but now, ironically, they just might become its saviors. In this video, I will explain how women might save the Japanese labor market, what their roles have been in the labor market so far, and lastly, we will look at some of the challenges they still face. We are in the 1970s. The Japanese economic miracle is booming ahead. Times are great, jobs are stable, lots of pay and promotions to be had. Things are good, both for those in the lifetime employment system as well as those in regular employment positions. However, if we take a closer look at who is harvesting and enjoying these bountiful times, they are men. At this time, women in the Japanese labor market were few and far between. Now, that's not to say that there weren't any, there certainly were, but most of them were participating in the labor market in a way that they were preparing for or expecting to soon retire from the labor market in order to take care of the home and the children. Sort of in line with this, women have always tended to work in non-regular or temporary job positions without an emphasis on career advancement. Since the 1990s, the number of women in the Japanese labor force has been increasing greatly, reaching as high as 73%, which is a very positive thing. However, most of the jobs that they have come to take up are of the non-regular variety, especially part-time jobs. In other words, these are positions with low pay, limited advancement, and very little job security as well. Not to mention limited, if any, training, which is quite important, especially in the Japanese labor market. In 2013, more than 70% of working women were employed in non-regular type jobs. By 2024, still more than 50% of women are working in non-regular positions as compared to 23% of men. The percentage that non-regular work takes up of the labor market is 36.7%. So you can clearly tell that the majority of these positions are indeed held by women. But why is this the case? Well, there are at least three reasons. Firstly, there is the just mentioned patriarchal view that men should take care of work and women should take care of the home. Secondly, Japanese companies strongly value loyalty, seniority or tenure, and lastly, dependability. And in this case, or from this point of view, women are at a disadvantage as they will often be leaving the labor market, if only temporarily and for a short time, to have children and potentially take care of them, or to have children and take care of them. Not sure why I put potentially in there. But this is a problem because even just leaving the labor market temporarily breaks this sense of accrued or accumulated seniority or tenure. And so it stifles the opportunities for advancement and one's position of seniority in the company. And this practically means that they are less promoted and seen as slightly less dependable in a way. I'm not personally saying that, but that is the view. Thirdly, the government itself has been promoting the idea and the value of men as the breadwinners and women as the supporters and the caretakers of the home, as housewives, essentially. And one of the ways this can be seen is through tax incentives. So specifically, if a dependent spouse earns less than 1.3 million yen, then they are eligible to be covered by spousal health insurance and welfare. Additionally, a dependent spouse may earn up to, or shall we say, granted that they earn less than 1.41 million yen in a year, then they will be eligible for major tax breaks. Whereas if they surpass that amount, and this is like a fixed threshold, so if they surpass it, they will be taxed 30% on all income, which means that a lot of people, especially if you only get to work part-time jobs, many women very closely measure or keep an eye on how much they're earning and reduce their hours in line with this amount to make sure they stay under the threshold. Well, now, this begs the question, because it doesn't sound like women are doing all that great in the labor market, so how exactly are they supposed to save the labor market? Well, in case you didn't know, Japan, like many other countries, are going through a bit of a demographic challenge with a shrinking population, an aging population, and a lot less babies being born. Just in Japan, that development, or these developments, are a lot more extreme. Now, this brings a plethora of challenges and issues. However, as far as this video is concerned, it specifically is reducing and shrinking the working age population, aka the available workforce. Now, this is bad for the functioning of society, for the labor market. Luckily for Japan, the answer in the short term can be found right under their own noses, because up to 50% of their available labor force are underutilized because it's women. With more than 50% of working women being in non-regular employment instead of regular employment, the amount of hours worked, the amount of hours that could be gained of work and productivity if these more than 50% were raised to full-time employment are massive. The gains are massive. Massive to the extent that one could even argue that in the short term at least, women might just be able to save the Japanese labor market from its current troubles. Now, interestingly, the government has repeatedly declared its intent to better utilize women in the workforce. Take, for example, Shinzo Abe, the former prime minister or late prime minister. He had a work play on economics, which was Abenomics, and then they went on to take that and then make a further work play, which was Womenomics, to emphasize the role that they saw women having in the economy. The government also made a declaration back in 2002 saying that 30% of executive positions should be held by women by 2020. That did end up not really working out, and so that goal has been moved till 2030. And as recently as last year, former Prime Minister Fumio Kishida made that declaration publicly, that they were aiming to hit this goal. But this is where you might wonder, but wasn't it also the government that set in place these tax incentives that made it so that it didn't make sense for women to work more? And yes, it is. And yes, that tax incentive, if you will, or that tax structure is still very much in place. To be fair, as far as I've heard, there is also the aspect of this tax system being intended to help these financially weaker dependent spouses be able to support themselves. However, I do also think that there are certainly ways that you can do that where you can support the financially weaker dependent spouses without also disincentivizing them from working more. It just doesn't make sense for their own goals. But then again, it certainly isn't the first time you've heard a country or a government say that they want one thing, and then you look at the existing structures and they are very much working against that thing. Not a new phenomenon at all. Now then, as for that 30% female executive goal, I have to say, I'm not too optimistic that they're going to reach it. The thing is, the Japanese government has a tendency to often make declarations like this, where they say they want a certain thing, but then they don't really follow up on it very much. And by the way, hi there, my name is Alexander and I have a bachelor's degree in Japan studies. And one of the things that I would see repeatedly when I studied Japan studies was that you would see the Japanese government make a statement, a goal, a vision for the future in some area, like say the labor market and the way that employees are treated, etc. And then you look at the policies that they actually make, and then you will very often see them say, we want this thing. But then if you don't act in accordance with it, well, nothing's gonna happen, essentially. So a lot of the time it's more seen as the government laying out guidelines for how they wish things are, but they're not really gonna follow up on it very much, as there very rarely are consequences to not meeting the goals. But let's take a look at leadership roles in females, the executive positions currently held by women, and if these developments are going the right way. So in 2022, the percentage of women in executive positions were, drumroll, do you have a guess? It did increase over the past couple of years, or from 2020 till 2022 or so. However, it only went up to 11.4 from like 10 point something percent. Yeah, so it's not going great as far as there only being 5 years left to reach the goal. And you know, this is really funny because as I was researching the script here and getting reacquainted with this topic, lo and behold, what I found after saying just before about how the government usually engages with these things right after talking about my Japan studies experience. In acknowledgement of the barriers facing women in the workforce, the key policy proposes actions including the promotion of female entrepreneurs, flexible working arrangements, and the closing of the wage gap. But the new goals are voluntary and without penalties. Would you look at that? Would you look at that? And this is the case very often, that they will make these, again, declarations and whatnot for how they want things to be, but they're not gonna really, they never take hard actions, and so it's more, we want you to do this. If you don't do it, you're mean. So in general, if you ever follow Japanese politics and what the politicians are saying, you should be very careful to actually look at the actions they're really taking, not just what they're saying, because what they're saying is often just made to sound good and scripted in such a way that they will get as little opposition and be in as little trouble as possible. And even if you read government documents as well in Japanese, you will reach so much fluff just talking about reaching all of these lovely goals, and there will be almost nothing concrete in there for anyone to criticize. So yeah, getting back on track, the primary party at the heart of the current government is the Liberal Democratic Party, which is a conservative party that has held the power in the country for almost 50 years, with a few interruptions occasionally, but generally speaking, it has always been the LDP at power. Among its conservative members, there are many who still, or some at least, who still have these conservative values and these traditional values of the women or woman being the housewife and the man being the breadwinner. However, begrudgingly, they still have to support policies that promote women's role in the labor market and the advancement of women in the labor market, because it is a necessity both economically and for the Japanese society as a whole. But that doesn't mean that they're going to support it with all their hearts, so to speak. Internationally, it has been shown that if parents work together while raising a child, sharing the responsibilities at home, and you have a society that is geared to supporting child rearing, etc., it is possible for women to both fully participate in the labor market and also have children. Jumping off from that note for a moment, in 2022, the Cabinet Office of Japan made a survey where they found that 33.5% of the adult population agreed with the statement that the husband should work outside while the wife should take care of the household. While this percentage might seem high, remember that a lot of the working age population, a lot of the adults, are elderly due to the demographic makeup of Japan. And when you consider how this way of thinking used to be common sense, you can really tell how it has decreased by a lot. Whether such values are preferable or not aside, it is important for Japan to utilize, and especially better utilize, their currently highly educated but dormant workforce. But at the same time, it's also critical that they make changes to accommodate their shrinking birth numbers. However, it also puts us in an interesting situation when you both, on the one hand, want to utilize women as much as you can in the labor market, but also want more children, right? So while more women are working than ever have before in Japan, at the same time, the demographics are worsening and more women are choosing not to have children, as can be seen in the low birth numbers. But why are women choosing not to have children in Japan? To look at that, you can check out this video next.